A close relationship with God is not a product of moral righteousness. Moral righteousness is a product of a close relationship with God. This is super duper important for us right now. I think I come across and I'm around people, at least half of people I would say, that call themselves Christians and are trying to walk and trying to draw near to God. They've got their horse and their cart in the wrong positions. So, what does that mean? It means that we are focusing on our sin, trying to get rid of it, trying to rid it from our lives. And we're doing that because we think if we do those things, if we get rid of this sin in our lives, then that will increase our depth of our relationship with God. And so, generally what I find most people are doing is they're spinning their wheels. It doesn't work. The sin gets worse. It becomes harder to get rid of. It actually does the exact opposite of the thing that they're trying to do, which is get rid of sin, to go closer to God. But it's not that way. Let me explain it in a metaphor that has really helped me since it has come to me. It's the metaphor of a child walking to its mother for the first time. Say, maybe 2 years old, let's say. So you have a toddler, right? It's the classic scene. Toddler's at one side of the living room, trying to stand up on wobbly legs. Mom is at the opposite side of that same room, on her knees, hands outstretched before her, eyes locked on baby. Come on, walk to mom. And the child stands up, wobbles on legs. She locks her eyes on her mother, and she takes that first step. She takes another step, and then she looks down at the floor, and then where does she go? To the floor. She goes to the floor every time she looks at the floor, right? That is how we are with sin. The floor in this metaphor is sin. Mama, on the other side of the room, is God. Hands outstretched towards us, smiling, eyes locked on us. Come to me. What does mom do the moment she sees daughter unlock her eyes and start looking around the room or at the floor? She's like, no, look at mommy, because she knows something deep in her knows that if that baby girl keeps her eyes on me, she's going to make it across this room. And eventually that does happen. If what? What is mom tasked with? Keeping baby girl's attention on her. No, look over here. Don't look over there. That's God and us, right? We are babies compared to the ancient evil in this world that is trying to pull us to the floor. We're no match. We're not winning that fight. Our only hope is if we keep our eyes locked on God. I'm getting a fish, 1 second. It's just one of those dirty little green Colorado catfish that is undesirable. All right, I'm back. So, you see what happens when the baby locks her eyes away from her mom and looks at the floor. What is she trying to do? She's trying to conquer the problem herself. She's going to keep her eyes on her target, which is sin, right? The problem, the thing we don't want in our lives, the threat. We like to keep our eyes locked on the threat because it's a threat, right? It's a problem. That's what you do when something is untrustworthy. You keep your eyes on it. You keep your enemies close, right? You watch it. But that's actually not what God is saying is our way to him. That's what the world tells us to do. Solve your own problems. Do your own thing. Well, if you want to grow closer to God, guess what? You're going to have to get with the program. You're going to have to do this, that, and the other. Now, Jesus said, those who are my followers will, what? Do what I say. And that's true. The goal is still to get across the living room. The goal is still to conquer sin, right? But if our carriage is in front of our horse, we are plowing into the back of it and we're not moving an inch. The horse is faith. The carriage is works. We conquer sin through faith. That is the vehicle for movement. It is keeping our eyes locked on God. That's what moves us forward. That's what gets us across the living room. That's how we conquer sin. It's like we're toddlers lost at the grocery store. There's no way out unless we can finally spot mom or dad's pant leg again. There's no other hope. That's it. We're toast. If we can't find mom or dad again, we're toast. We're not going to make it in this world alone. We're two. So, and that's the hardest part. Well, we think, a lot of us do this knowingly, actually. We know that it's like, well, I'd rather work on my own sin than make eye contact with the one true living God. For some of us, that is actually a lot easier. Or we think. It's less personal. We get to do it on our own. We get to go off in our own corner, build our little workshop, and fill our storehouses with grain, and we can do it ourselves. And that's what the Pharisees thought. Because what that actually is, it is an insistence that we can save ourselves is actually a mask worn by the desire of being our own God. Really, it's this deep rebellious nature in us that wants to do this ourselves because we want the credit and we don't want to rely on somebody for our very existence. We want to have the power to do things ourselves, but this is not the order of the cosmos. It's just like you see those, I've been a roofer, I've been a commercial fisherman in Alaska, I've done all these roughneck jobs, right? There's always at least 1 or 2 or 10 guys that are doing the grunt work that have, if I was in charge of this ship, I'd be running it a lot better than this guy over here. And they just are spiteful about having to take orders from another man. This is why following authority is so important, because it's a practice run for this, for the way it really is. Because when we all die, we will figure out very quickly that we are not in control of where our souls go. Once this whole world and everything that we tried to lock down and control, once all of this vanishes like a puff of smoke, and we're standing in eternity, staring at God, not even control of where our spiritual bodies move to, we are standing before the judgment seat whether we want to or not, we will figure out very quick that we were never in control. It's just like a guy on a fishing boat who thinks he'd be a much better captain, but then the captain passes out. He learns real quick, I don't even know how to drive this ship. It's like that. Our only hope is keeping our focus on God. That's it. That's what we got. I've got a couple evidences for this, and it might ask a couple questions that some of you may have. So let's go to the Word here. Let me ask you a question and then answer it in this video. Going to Romans chapter 14, right? It's one of my favorite chapters because it really shows what matters here. It's a it's a wonderful chapter when you're trying to show somebody what the intent of the law is opposed to the letter of the law. You know, like you have a house inspector, right? And he comes around and he finds the tiniest thing and he doesn't pass the house inspection because of this tiny thing. That guy's like, come on, this is ridiculous. But the new inspector is like, it's in the book. Look, it's in the book. You can look at it for yourself. Black and white, there's the sentence. But then that guy who owns the house, who's building the house, he takes it to that guy's, the inspector's higher ups, and the higher ups are like, don't worry about that. It's the new guy. The new guy's the Pharisee. But it's in the book. It's in the book. And how many chapters and how many books and how many letters did Paul have to write to try to get this through our heads? That there's an intent behind the law. The law was always fulfilled with love. Abraham wasn't a perfect man. He laughed at God when he said you would be a father at 90. Moses wasn't a perfect man. He wasn't even allowed to enter the promised land. But these were our forefathers. Why? Faith. Samson was not a perfect man. David did some terrible things. These are our heroes. These are who God exalted above all of humanity. Why? Because they pursued God with their heart, not with their works. And of course, what did David do when he felt what he had done? There's Psalms written about it. And so in the way, it is both, but one can only lead the other cannot pull the other behind it. That's how it works. Romans chapter 14, verse 1. Accept him whose faith is weak, without passing judgment on disputable matters. One man's faith allows him to eat everything, but another man whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. I ask you, why is Paul saying that the person who only allows himself to eat vegetables has weak faith? If you're wondering whether it's a mistranslation or something, I've got the Strongs here, so I looked up this Greek word for weak, and it's asthenio, and it means to be weak, to be sick, to be without strength. Impotent folk, weak, sick, weak, am weak, becoming weak, fell sick, feeble, to be feeble. And so it means weak the way we understand it, right? That's weak. So what would make that man's faith weaker than the man who is allowed to eat everything? Well, I tell you, it's because the man who knows he's allowed to eat everything understands the intent of the law is faith and love, and that on most matters, disputable matters, that always holds true. Now, there are certain sins, right, where it doesn't matter. What we're talking about is the why behind a thing instead of the what. When God told us not to eat pork, way back in the day, the ancient Israelites, he was teaching us obedience. He has made all those things okay today now, but some people latch on to that still. Why? Because they still don't understand this, that it's not about what we do, it's about why we do it. God doesn't just have beef with pork. He's not just mad at pork. He was teaching us obedience. He's not holding us to that law anymore, because really, in John 4:23 says that, and these true worshipers have now come, the worshipers that God has always wanted, the Father has always wanted. Jesus is speaking. He said, these are my true worshipers who worship me in spirit and truth. What is spirit? Meaning, the why, the reason we do things. That's spirit. And what's the reason we do it? Truth. What is the deepest truth? Love. Unconditional, sacrificial love. And so that's why it says love covers over a multitude of sins. Because what that verse is saying is if you live by the intent of the law, then you don't have to live by the letter of the law any longer. You are children, not slaves. And so this person who doesn't allow themselves to eat pork, Paul is saying that their faith is weak because they don't understand this. They don't get this. They still see it as this works-based And many people will disagree with me when they say, there's like, no, I'm not works-based, but yeah, I don't allow myself to eat pork. You're works-based. You are. I'm not trying to insult anybody here, but we got to get this through our heads. I mean, I can hear the exasperation in Paul's, oh, I know it. It's in my own heart. But if you don't really understand this, then what you're doing is you're trying to stare at that floor, conquer that floor, and then make it over to mom. You want to save your own soul. You have not yet accepted and surrendered to the full authority of God in your life. I have another verse, or another example. Who in their heart is wondering this very moment whether we Christians are allowed to have alcohol at all? Well, let me answer. I mean, there's several of this, but you go to Ecclesiastes, both in chapter 8. Yeah, both in chapter 8. So Ecclesiastes 8:15. So I commend the enjoyment of life, because nothing is better for a man under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. Then joy will accompany him in his work all the days of the life God has given him under the sun. And a little further down, 9:7, go, eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for it is now that God favors what you do. But always be clothed in white, and always anoint your head with oil. I'm getting ready to make a full video on sanctification, but when he writes always be clothed in white, that is the fresh white linen that the bride wears in Revelation 19 to the wedding supper of the Lamb. It's the same white. And what that white symbolizes is sanctified soul, a sanctified, glorified body that we are giving, morning stars, right? That's what we're given. This is our white robes. The wedding parable for Jesus. He's like, how did this guy come in without his wedding clothes? This is this sanctified what? Sanctified faith. It means that you sanctified your faith, not your works. The works are the carriage. It's coming with you, you know. Trust me, the more you learn to genuinely trust God, you naturally become more like Him. Who wouldn't? But the problem is trying to get that perfect, trying to sanctify your works before you've done the faith. And a lot of people who do this don't even know that they're doing it, right? They don't even know that they're doing it. There's a Colossians 2 something, I'll put it on the screen, where it says, don't let anybody judge you for the festivals or the Sabbath or the food you eat, any of that. And this is what he means by that. So that's a good litmus test. Do you still put your chin up a little in the air when it comes to these festivals and Sabbaths and all these Old Testament laws? It's no problem. I love keeping the Sabbath for the right reasons, right? But do you focus on the what rather than the why? Do you look at this cross and say, idolatry? Do you understand the intent behind the thing? So, I mean, this can be kind of complicated things if you've never really searched your spirit, right? But you have to. You got to dig in real deep to understand these things. It's very important. And so, what did I write about drinking to finish answering that question? I said some Christians think that alcohol equals evil always. Wrong. Other Christians think that alcohol is okay, but don't you dare get buzzed. The moment you get buzzed, that's sinful. Sober mind, you know? Wrong again. What is your intent? Do not get attached to these things, right? That's the issue. It says very clearly, enjoy your life. Don't do it for the wrong reasons. Here's the thing. The moment you worship a thing, it's a problem. So, is being rich evil? No. But, is spending your entire life chasing riches rather than God evil? Yes. That's when it becomes a sin. Same thing with alcohol. Is it sinful to have a few drinks with a friend here and there. No. Is it sinful to even get buzzed with those friends then? No. It's okay. But don't rely on it. Don't let yourself get into a spot where you're serving it and where you're running to it instead of God. When you feel bad, when you're going through a rough time in life, don't rely on it. Don't run to it. If you feel like that's creeping into you, flee from it. This is what the law was always designed to teach us. The law was designed to teach us what sin was, to show us how to be obedient to God for that hierarchy, and to literally pay for transgressions until the coming of the Son, right? With animal sacrifice and stuff, the Day of Atonement. So there's a specific reason all these things existed. I'll go to, just to kind of put a pin in this, I think it was Proverbs 23, where it speaks of the danger here of, what alcohol can do to you. The thing is, you need to be respectful of these things. If you know that you have a particular weakness to a thing, perhaps you stay away from it for the rest of your life. Good. Do it for the right reasons. But if you're not one of those people and you can drink a few times here and there, no problem. You don't crave it the next day. You don't wake up with this fat headache. You don't forget what you did last night. You don't go overboard. And we all know that line in us, right? We know when we've eaten too much sweets. We know when we're gorging ourselves with food. We know where that line is in us when we've gone too far. There were plenty of people who were drunk at the wedding party celebration that Jesus created more wine for. It was a celebration, right? And those things are okay. But the danger of it, Proverbs 23, 30 through 35, those who linger over wine, who go to sample bowls of mixed wine, do not gaze at wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it goes down smoothly, idolizing it. Do not love this. Do not fall in love. Do not seek it like it's your savior. In the end, it bites like a snake and poisons like a viper. Your eyes will see strange sights and your mind imagine confusing things. You will be like one sleeping on the high seas, lying on top of the rigging. They hit me, you will say, but I'm not hurt. They beat me, but I don't feel it. When will I wake up so I can find another drink? That's basically saying life can beat me all at once, but I don't feel it because I run to the bottle. I'm numb myself to the world. Now it's become a problem. You see, and it can be a very slippery slope. So things that we'd be very careful about are substances, right? We know people go down from those, but if you think that there are certain things that are not inherently sinful themselves and they are just off limits and you have this kind of weird thing where you think they should be off limits for all people, like pork or like holding the festivals. I know a person who literally calls America Babylon because we don't hold the festivals and that there's a lot of sin, there's sin everywhere, but they see the sin here in America and they, make these deductions and they think that you have to hold on to the festivals, you have to obey the Sabbath, you have to abstain from pork, and since America is this Christian nation that's not doing any of those things, we must be Babylon. I hate to have to be this bold, unfortunately, but I do. That is a weak faith. That is somebody who is still relying on the letter of the law without fully understanding the intent of the law that has set us free. There's a reason he did that. Let me go. It's so funny that I have explained this 100 ways before I ever read this. Explained how God has raised humanity like as a single entity, like a child. So in the beginning you tell your 2-year-old, don't touch that hot stove. But you don't have to tell your 18-year-old the same thing, right? Your 18-year-old, you tell different lessons than your 2-year-old. The same way God has done with all of humanity. The law was given to us to show us sin because we were in our infancy, all of humankind altogether. But now we are free. And it's funny, I came across that same thing in Galatians 4. Galatians 4 says, 1, what I am saying is that as long as the heir is a child, he is no different from a slave. Although he owns the whole estate, he is subject to guardians and trustees, the law, until the time set by his father. So also when we were children, mankind, God's children, We were in slavery under the basic principles of the world, the law. But when the time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem us under the law, that we might receive the full rights as sons. Because you are sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son. And since you are a son, God has made you also an heir. You don't need diapers at 18 years old. You don't need training wheels on your bike. You can walk into danger. That's what we're doing as we're here. We are conquering sin by getting across the living room to our Father. But we are an adult here when it comes to the spiritual sense. We've inherited the kingdom of God. Another one is Galatians 3, kind of to wrap this point up. Galatians 3:12 says, the law is not based on faith. On the contrary, the man who does these things, the law, will live by them. Catch that. What that means is the man who consciously and insistently lives by the law will have no choice but to focus on the law and live for the law. This is what the Pharisees did. The law of God, the rule book from God, became an idol. You see, we worshiped our ability to beat the floor beneath our feet rather than our ability to walk confidently into God's arms. Those who live by the law live for the law. And there just is no other way. And God always knew that was going to happen. But his true worshipers do not worship by law, for law. They worship in spirit and truth. So, thanks.